Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you're having a good Thursday so far. I'm Hilary Stupa, and I am a developer for Qdabra software. And we're going to talk about Microsoft Flow again today. We've done a couple webinars recently on Microsoft Flow, and one piece of feedback I had after the last one I did was that it would be interesting to walk through building an entire flow. So that's what we're going to do. It's mostly going to be demos today as we walk through this. After this webinar is over, we also are having an open door kind of conversation on Flow. That starts at 9 a.m. And I just forgot to check with anybody as to whether or not there was a new URL for that meeting. So what I'll probably do is just keep using this webinar for that, which means, this is long-winded, sorry, which means if you cannot stay for that and you drop off the meeting, that's just fine. We will send out a survey via email afterwards as well. And if you fill out the survey, there's some assorted materials besides the slides, because I also made a copy of some of my SQL scripts and stuff. So for some of you, those might be useful, not sure. But at any rate, that's the administrative trivia. We'll get started. Okay, so first quick, if you haven't heard about Forms Viewer, that's our latest product. We're very proud of it. It's a new way of using your browser forms instead of having to rely on InfoPath form services and SharePoint. And it's kind of under some continuous improvement. So if you're using it now, it does keep getting better. We keep expanding on it. It has queue rules built in. So hopefully if you haven't tried it, you'll look into that. Let us know if that's something you need some assistance with. Next is I copied out some stuff from the Microsoft Flow site that I just thought was interesting. And if you haven't investigated the frequently asked questions area on Flow, you might want to look at it. They do have some kind of high-level information there that I think is useful if you haven't really started using it yet. And it's basically intended to be a workflow tool. Allows you to connect a number of different services and automate what you can. I'm a huge believer in automation. There's so many things that only people can do. So we definitely want to save our precious resources for the things that only people can do, the decisions only people can make. If there's stuff that can be automated instead, we certainly want to do that. Nobody should have to do something boring like copy data from one site to another, right? That should definitely be the jobs of a machine. This quote made me laugh because it's, all full of jargon. And this whole citizen integrators I thought was kind of a funny new phrase. I don't know about everybody else, but I always sort of cringe when I hear phrases like power users and so forth, and citizen integrators was a new one to me. But the general concept here is that Flow is intended to be straightforward enough, at least at its lowest level, that really anyone can put one together, so that, Joe over in accounting, or, Jeannie, who's a business process analyst but doesn't do a lot of in-depth kind of digging around on complicated things, can put together simple flows that take care of things for them. So if you have, some folks in your organization who are pretty SharePoint savvy or pretty Excel savvy, you might want to make sure they're aware of this process builder, so that they can start putting together some simple flows for themselves as well. I do have a couple of quick polls, and I'm going to hopefully launch those yet. So this first one it's the same thing that I asked the last time I did a Flow webinar, and that is because I'm very interested in knowing who's using it, if you're using it, and that's just because I think it's a cool new thing, and I'd like to know if people are trying it yet. I think sometimes when there's something new, we don't always see what the use case is for ourselves or our organization, but do kind of keep it in mind the next time you have something that requires some level of automation. So I'll go ahead and probably close this here in a second. I see we've over half have voted, and most people haven't really used it. much. Most people are saying no, 70% no, 30% are like, yeah, I've tested it out. I've got one other that I want to launch, and that is, and this one's weird. I don't feel like these groupings are very good. I was kind of trying to group together different types of actions in flow to get a sense of what might be interesting to you. Hopefully everybody here has my email address. If you don't, I'm going to put it in chat right now. If you come up with some things that you're interested in terms of using flow, and you'd like to suggest, hey, can we look at this for a future webinar on flow? That would be great. Just, just drop me an email, let me know. We're very open to suggestions. And it looks like most people are interested in so far in SharePoint, which today I'm doing some, today the workflow we're going to build includes Azure. It happens to include DBXL to get the data into Azure. We'll talk about workarounds for that. If you're not a DBXL user, that's fine. But if mainly the interest is in SharePoint, we can certainly look at some additional SharePoint scenarios that might be of interest. So again, email me if you think of something else that you're interested in terms of flow and webinars, because I definitely want to make sure we're talking about things that are of interest to our regular attendees. It's a cool new technology, and I think it would be fun to do more with it in these webinars. Partly just because I like building stuff with it. So if you guys come up with cool ideas for things you'd like to build, send them my way and we'll do a webinar on your particular problem just because I like using flow for stuff. Don't tell my boss, okay? So today, I felt like, you guys remember, or maybe you've seen it on stuff where they show the little disclaimer, oh, this is based on real events, So this is based on an actual client project. This client is using InfoPath for a daily time card. They do use DBXL to put their time card data in a database. Like I mentioned, you could use MS Flow for that as well. We'll talk about that a little bit. So everybody fills out a time card Monday through Friday. And every following Monday, they want an email sent out to anyone who's missing any time cards for the prior week. So it's Monday the 12th. If I have any time cards missing for the week of the 5th, I should get an email letting me know, hey, you don't have a time card in for Tuesday or Thursday, get on it. And then they also want to make sure that the management team gets a single email saying, okay, so George, Tiffany, and David had missing time cards this week, so that they kind of have this high-level view. But they don't want the management team to get every single email because, as we all know, that's annoying. So this is what our spec is, really. If we're gonna build something, we kind of need to know what our spec is, and this is kind of what our spec is. The options that I considered when this project first came up and discarded were, first off, obviously, SharePoint workflow. Well, we're counting stuff that's not there, not stuff that is there. So that kind of blows SharePoint workflow out of the water, right? We can't put a workflow on this library to check for the non-existence of things. What if I didn't turn in any time cards all week, right? Form workflow, well, it's not really suitable for something that would go in the form, because again, this is something that doesn't exist, not something that does exist. And then scheduled something or another on SQL Server. Well, yes, I could have set up database mail on the SQL Server. I could have used, because this is using a SQL backend for the data, and I could have used SQL integration services to run every Monday night and check for this data and send an email. This is true. My client, however, is pretty SharePoint savvy, but not super SQL savvy. So if he wanted to make changes to this, like little changes in the text in the email or something like that, he would have been having to ask us to make those changes. Whereas with a flow, I created it, I made it a team flow so that he was on it and had access to it. And if he goes and decides, oh, this shouldn't go to so-and-so, on this final email, it should go to thus and such instead. You know, he could go and make these little changes without needing my assistance. Yeah, it does have a SQL component that if he needed help with, you know, changing some of these stored procedures I've got running on the back end, he'd probably need a dev. But at least at the top level, some of this more less devy stuff, right? He would have been able to make changes. And finally, the final reason I used Flow for this, and I would like to say I think this is a valid reason, is I just wanted to try it. And I think, you know, wanting to try something new is it's an okay reason to go ahead and try this different technology. So let's go ahead and hit the next slide. Here we go. Me and PowerPoint, you guys know by now, right? This is not my jig. It takes me forever to create these PowerPoint decks, even though they're so tiny. It's just like watching me do a Word document. It's just madness. You'd be like, oh, she's really incompetent. But I mean, I'm good with this other stuff. It's just Word and PowerPoint kill me every time. Or this Visio diagram that I did special for you guys that just about made me tear out my hair. And you can see this is not very sophisticated. This is our kind of our general data flow. They've got a resources list in SharePoint, and that is used in the daily time card form as well. You pick your resource name. And since that was already in place, I leveraged that resource list as part of my flow. The data from the time card form goes to a SharePoint library and to an Azure database. This diagram is sort of off because if you use DBXL, then you know that the data goes to the library and then from the library to your database. So that one arrow is this arrow right here is kind of not really true, but I think it's easier to sort of conceptualize if you think of it this way. My flow looks generally like this. There's a few more steps to it. You can see some SQL steps in here, and we're just going to start from a blank flow and rebuild this thing. And before we get started, I did want to show you this because I mentioned to you, if you were here in a previous webinar, if you weren't, that's cool. One of the neat things about Flow, if you like stuff that, you know, changes and updates a lot, which I do, I think it's cool when I go look at something and it's different now. That's always, you know, captures my attention, is Flow is continuously being updated. Right, so every time you turn around, they're releasing something new for it. And so I went to go and open up a flow, my old one, to take a look at it and kind of see what the steps were and do these slides. And boom, there's a dashboard, which wasn't there before. So we'll take a look at that here in just a second. So here we go. We are going to go directly into our demo as soon as I figure out how to make this slide not block everything. And what we're going to do is we're going to build this time card reminder system. And let me just make sure that I'm not, okay, so I am showing the right stuff. Okay, so here was my big surprise. I went here to my time card reminder, and what I expected this to do when I clicked on it was open up the run history. And instead it opened up this dashboard, which is actually pretty cool. So it shows me my different connections. It shows who owns it. If I want to add another owner, I can do that here. It shows my run history, and I can go take a look at any of these runs from there. We are actually going to start with a brand new flow. And let's see here, my flows. Sorry, I need to get to the right place here. Create from blank. So create from template means let's go find a template that exists that maybe has steps close to what I want to do. I'm a cowboy. I pretty much always go create from blank unless I don't know what I'm doing. So like the first few times, usually the first few times I try something new, if there's some kind of a template option or a demo option or something like that, I'll take it. And then after a couple times, I usually am like, yeah, you can keep your wizards. I'd rather do this on my own. But it is a good way to learn something new. So if you haven't done anything with Flow yet, definitely go look at the templates that are out there and start with one of those instead. I already know I want to start with a recurrence. Now, these folks had the requirement that this was going to run every Monday night. So what I did was I started with a recurrence step. I set the frequency today, every 7 days, right? Show advanced options, start time. So I could set this, and there's a time zone option too. I don't think I changed anything there. I could set this to start you know, I'm their dev, it's Thursday, I'm going to get this thing done today and tomorrow or something like that. So I could set this to start running June 19th, for example, on that evening. So I could do 2017-0619, whoops, T, you know, it showed the little date format. This is a typical date format if you're used to working with InfoPath, right? We've all seen these dates in XML, you know, and I could do, I'm going to just run it, they said midnight, but I'm just going to run it at 11:30. And actually, I probably need to be using, did it show me AM and PM? Oh, so I probably need to be using, look at that 15 there. So you can see I probably need to be using the 24-hour clock, which makes sense. So these little tips, you know, that you see when you see like hint text and so forth, yeah, read that stuff. That's going to make your life a lot easier. If you don't read it, then you're doing things like I was with 11:59, so it'd be 23:30. Okay, so I've got this thing set to start next Monday. It's going to run every 7 days. So that takes care of the first thing that I needed to worry about. And you know, I could rename this. And usually I would, something like, you know, run every 7 days, right? Something like that. Because now when I roll it up, you know, now I don't have to go look at it to know what's in there, right? And so that's just a time saver for you, time saver for someone else. If you take a screenshot of this down the road, at least it has some data that makes sense. Okay, so now I mentioned to you they have a resources list. So their resources list listed people's names. It didn't use a people picker. I did double check on this a few weeks ago when I was prepping for the other webinar I did on Flow. And if you use a people picker, that's fine. You're going to have access to all the person's properties in Flow. You would have access to their email address and this, that, and the other. Since in this case, my client had not used a people picker, they just had a list of names, and this was an existing system that I was not going to mess with, I went ahead and just added an email column to their list. And the other thing you could add as well, and that I do have in theirs, is an active, inactive column. And then that way you could make sure your flow here was only running for active resources. Now, why are we starting with the resources? Because we are checking for the non-existence of time cards, okay? So we've got all of these resources, and they may or may not have filled out 5 time cards for last week. So this is where we start. We want to loop through these resources and say, hey, yo, Marvin, did you fill out 5? Yes, no, I'm going to email you. You know, Bugs, did you fill out 5? Yes, no, I'm going to email you. Okay, so we're starting with our resources list, and that's going to be a SharePoint action. There's so many actions here that if you don't see, you know, your basic kind of connector up here, just search. It's just, you don't want to have to scroll through that list. So I'm going to select SharePoint, and then it shows me all the actions that are SharePoint actions. And what I want is get items. And scrolling, more scrolling, scroll on the inside, scroll on the outside. We will never tire of scrolling. Okay, I need my site address. So I'm going to go over here and copy that. Like, you don't have to copy paste everything. You can type stuff in. I'm a typo girl myself. I make mistakes, so I usually am somebody who's going to paste. Okay, so oh, do you see that? I picked the wrong action. Sorry, guys. We got to delete that bad boy. Yeah, we know. I didn't want get item. I want to get items, all of them. So my bad. Let's find that again. Isn't it fun when we do this stuff live in real life? Get items. Where? There you are. Huh. Crazy me thinking that would be in alphabetical order. Live and learn. So here's our list name, and we want our resources list. If we were going to filter these on active, inactive, we would use an OData filter here. I encourage you to test your OData filters in the browser. So if you wanted to use an OData filter here, let's just say you want the one where title is Bugs Bunny, right? We're gonna take the time to show you this because this is you would do something like this. Here's your site, right? Underscore VTI. You can see I was testing some stuff yesterday, and I'll tell you about that stuff later. List data, SVC, right? So you go to the list data service, right? So it's your site, VTI bin, list data service. You find the name of your list. Now, stuff like daily time card, my actual list name has spaces in it, but you can see in the list data service, it does not. So if you're doing a test where you want to verify that your URL is going to return, that your query filter is going to return data, you would want to pay attention to what it's called here, right? And I could do /resources. And if I just do that, I'm going to get the option to save, and I'm going to open it. We'll just open it in Notepad. We're not picky. Drag this over. Okay, so you can see here's my data. Now, let's just say I just want Tasmanian Devil. I could add filter title equals Tasmanian Devil. So if you had wanted to add a filter for active or inactive, you could test that in the browser first and make sure you had it right. And so if we wanted just Tasmanian Devil, we're going to do Bugs Bunny because we know I can spell that, okay? Resources, question mark, filter, and it is title, EQ, quotes, right? You know you've got it right when you get something like this back. Or some browsers, it'll return the data in the browser. But if you've got it wrong, you'll get an error. And that's what's actually helpful. So you can see here, I've only got one item, and that's because there's only one item in my resources list that's Bugs Bunny. So if I did something that was incorrect, like that, right? So if I was goofing around and I wanted to check my timesheet due date list for stuff where the calendar date is greater than today, and I was just guessing to see if there was a today function, you can see I get back an error here. So that is just sort of a heads up. If you're going to use a filter query, just test your query in the browser, and that one that I just did would look like this, you know, title EQ Bugs Bunny, right? Something like that. You could also add dynamic content if you had some available. However, that's not what I want to do here. I want to get all items, and I'm going to rename this. And try to rename as you go. Not all steps do this to you, but some steps, if you use the output in a later step, you cannot rename. So you really want to try to, you know, rename as you go, recognizing that your name may not be perfect if something changes down the road, but come on, this one, at least I know I need to get resources. Okay. Now, you and I know that this data is going to SQL, right? Because because I told you, right? So my daily time card here, it's using DBXL. Here's my DBXL settings. It's going to this daily time card. If you're a DBXL user and you haven't upgraded, I gotta tell you, this new DAT that's no longer an InfoPath, and you know people, you know I love InfoPath, but still, DAT and InfoPath was slow and obnoxious. So now we've got it in the browser. And it's certainly, I find it a much better user experience, to say the least. See how fast that is? Boom, boom. Nothing like InfoPath, right? So here's my data. It's being saved to a database. Here's my database over here. Okay, so I've got data. It's coming in here to daily time card. Now, I need to get back a list of people. I need to get back for each person. I'm going to need to get back a list of missing time cards, and I'm going to do this on the SQL Server because that's where I've got some processing power. I can do more complex things leveraging SQL logic than I can in Microsoft Flow. And I also need to, at the end of the situation, at the end of all of my workflow, when I've notified each user, I need to notify management in a single email of everybody I sent notifications to. So one piece of this process is I've got this simple little table called timecard notifications. And as I loop through each resource and figure out who does not have their time cards completed for the week, I'm adding them to this list of time card notifications. And this is kind of temporary data. All I need it for is sending that final email. So my first step here in my flow is going to be to make sure there's no data in this table from the last run. Now, there's two approaches to this sort of thing. A person could, at the end of their flow, clean up the table. But what if something went wrong and something in my flow aired out? I like to make sure that I know that I don't have data in something, right? So I'm going to get rid of those notifications. Anything that might be in that table, I'm going to get rid of that here before I run my next step. So this is going to be a SQL stored procedure. Now, execute stored procedure. Let me show you my stored procedure. It's super tricky. Here it is. And we're just going to go script as create to, right? So that we can take a look at it. Okay, truncate table, time card notifications, right? All I'm doing is deleting all the rows in this table. Using stored procedures is a nice way to add some layers between your execution and your process, right? So right now this stored procedure is a single line. But if down the road I needed it to do more, I could change my stored procedure without having to change this. So the first thing I need to do is make sure that this is connected to the right SQL server. We talked a little bit about this last time. You want to make sure you give your connection a decent name. One thing I've noticed, and let's rename this too. Let's call this truncate notification list. Yay. Okay. Now one thing I've noticed is sometimes when I change a connection, I don't get my procedure names right away. This time it brought them back. Sometimes I actually have to type it in. So this is my procedure. It doesn't have any input. It doesn't have any output. So this is all there is to this step. All this does is truncate that list for me. So now that my list is cleaned up and I'm ready to go, I'm going to do something for each of these resources. So I'm going to add and apply to each, okay? And so we select an output from the previous step. Well, this is easy and clean because I really only have the one thing going on, right? So this value is my repeating resources row. If this were an InfoPath data source, right, this would be a repeating row from my list. So now for every single one of these, let's go ahead and before we get too crazy, let's get this renamed. For each resource, right? And so right now I not only, I knew by the logo that it was a resource, but right now I know what I'm acting on here. And that will be useful to me down the road someday if I look at this again or if somebody else ever looks at it. So I mentioned I was going to use SQL to do kind of my heavy lifting here. So back we go to SQL. Here's our SQL Server connector, and we're going to execute a stored procedure again. And we're going to name this, let's get the right connection. You see how it always defaults to the first connection in the list? Honestly, that's not nearly as annoying as it looks, right? Whoops, not delete. Don't push the delete button. And so for this, we're going to get the missing dates, okay? So for each resource, I'm going to go and figure out, hey, what's missing? So I have a stored procedure for that, and it is update timesheet notification. Now you can see it's got these two parameters. We don't know what these parameters do unless we go look at the stored procedure or unless, we wrote it. So let's script it as create to. Hey, script as create to. This is something Jim Cantwell showed me. I used to do script as alter to when I wanted to see the script, but there's a chance that you're going to accidentally change something and click the execute button. If you do script as create, then you're not going to accidentally change it because this would fail if I executed it because it already exists and it starts with create. So that's just why I always pick create when I want to look at a script for something. If I decide I want to make changes, I can change that word to alter, right? So look, you can see this missing dates. It's an output. Name is an input. So what I'm doing here is I'm figuring out the due date, the week start date, and then I go and I check the submitted time cards to see what's missing. And then here I'm using stuff to create a concatenated string of missing dates because what I want is I want a single string returned that I can go ahead and stick in my email saying you are missing 6/4, 6/8, 6/7, whatever. okay? And so if there's any dates missing, I go ahead and I also insert into time card notifications the name that's been passed in, okay? So if I've got any missing dates, I add a row to that time card notifications table and I return 1. So if somebody's missing dates, I return 1. That's going to be used later on. And we also have the output of missing dates, which is my list of, hey, here's what you've got missing. Okay, and like I said, I've got the SQL script stuff together for you in case it's of interest to you. It's nothing too complex, but it might be some things that you're not familiar with. Okay, so that's what I'm doing there. And so this is my output. I don't put anything there. Name, though, I want my resource name. So let's go and find our resource name. And I think it's in the title field. So we're going to do that. Okay, so here's our SQL stored procedure where we're going to get the missing dates. Now, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to end up wanting to clean up this output. Okay, this output's going to come back in JSON. But right now, we're going to say that we don't know what that's going to look like, okay? Because sometimes that's part of this, is figuring some of this stuff out. So we're going to go ahead and skip our parse JSON step right now because we can add it later. And we're going to send a mail. And now you and I, we all know in the end, we want these mails to go to the resources in the list. But when you're developing this, are you going to do that? Are you going to be sending your emails to your users? Of course not. You know, you're going to send them to yourself. And so that's what we're going to do here. And so here in the email body, we're just going to say, hi, noticed you. You know, I wonder if we should, well, we'll do that in just a second. Noticed you were missing some time cards. And for right now, we're just going to put in that. Whoops. Where is get missing dates? Where's my output? Okay. 1 second. It's not showing me my output parameter. We're going to pause on this just for a second. Let's see. Let's add a condition here. And oh, there's the output parameter. How nice. Return code, whoop, is equal to 1. Remember how we're returning a 1? Okay, and let's rename you. Check return code. Okay, and let's see if they'll let me move this. Oh, thank you, Flo. Always happy when Flo does something nice for me. And you look at that, my missing dates is still, my output is still not available to me. So I think what we're going to go ahead and do is add an action. And we're going to go with a compose action right now. And just put the output in the compose action so we can see what it looks like, and then we'll change it to a parse JSON. This is not annoying at all. The flashing, I'm sure, is lovely for you as well. And input, there's my output parameter for missing dates. Now we know what that is. It's my list of missing dates. So we're just going to stick it right in compose. So now we know that that output is going to be right there in my compose, and we're going to throw it here in the email, right there. And I should rename the compose, but I'm going to throw it away, so I'm not going to rename it, okay? All right, and so I'm going to stop building right here and test what I've got, okay? I'm going to hit create flow. Looks like I left it named Untitled, and it does not like my start for my run because I did not include the Z. And let's rename this. Timecard reminder demo, because I think I already have something named Timecard reminder. Now let's see what happens. Nice of it to let me know about my formatting issue. All right. And now we're going to run this flow. Great. And spam myself. Now we're going to send me 8 emails. That'll be fantastic. Okay. Another thing I was pleased about was the other week when I was doing this, the necks weren't actually showing values, and I meant to show you guys that this wasn't working correctly, but I was so excited to find out that it is working correctly again, in that as we flip through these, look, see how it shows the different names? So you can look at each step and say, oh, here's who ran, right? And now look down here at the outputs. You can see what the outputs are. Look at that. Okay, so this is important right here, this missing dates, this output format. This is important. We're going to use that for our parse JSON step. And let me go pull open one of these emails, one of these 8 emails that I just got. All right, so this is what I get when I just use compose, right? That is not pretty. Right, not pretty at all. And so what we're going to do is we're going to fix that up with a little bit of JSON magic, with a parse JSON. So there's 2 ways we can find out what our returned syntax is, right? I emailed it to myself. That was one way. The other way is just to, you know, go look in here. This is the schema of the returned value. So I just copied that. We're going to hit Edit Flow. And we are going to go and take care of this. So first thing we've got to do, we want to get rid of that compose step. So that means we're going to delete output there. We don't want it anymore, and we had to delete it to be able to delete this step. We're going to delete that. Okay, that's fine. We're going to hit plus here. We're going to add an action. You guys, I really do love flow. And we're going to do parse. And what we want is parse JSON. And now you're going to understand why I did this whole blah blah. Okay, so my content is the output parameters. I got to put the schema in here. Are you a JSON person? Because I am not. It is very new to me. I haven't used it for much of anything. I'm sure there's people out there that are rock stars with it, but they give us this helpful little thing here. What's my sample payload? That same thing that went through the compose, went through the email. This is my sample payload. And so I can say done. And now it generated a schema for me. Isn't that sweet? Okay, so now I've got a parse JSON step. I'm going to rename it, and I'm going to call it parse missing date output. Okay, so now I've got a name that makes sense, so that even when this guy's closed up, it'll make sense to me. And now down here in my send email, I can say, hi, I noticed you were missing some time cards, missing dates. And now here is my parse missing date output. See how it's got that name, missing dates? That's because the object had that in it when we created this schema. So now we've got our email ready to go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I was just checking how many emails I got. I got 6, which I think is right. I think I only had 2 resources that filled out all their time cards last week. And the other thing we're going to do, obviously, if this were you and you were still developing this, whoops, cancel, you wouldn't change this yet. But I am going to change this now to the resources because I used Mailinator mailboxes, and we can go ahead and just check their mailboxes. And if you have you know, friendly resources who don't care if you send them a bunch of spam emails, you know, go ahead and test with your real people. Okay, so now my email is all set up correctly, and let me think. We have one more thing we have to do that we talked about, which is going ahead and letting everybody who has gotten a reminder, we need to let management know. So that's going to happen after this for each resource step. For each resource, I'm going to change this name. We can change it because we haven't used this step in anything else yet. Notify of missing time cards. You like the way I sometimes use sentence case and sometimes use title case? I'm sure that doesn't make anybody out there have an eye twitch. Okay, so next step. An action. We are going to be doing another SQL query, another SQL stored procedure, because I need to get a list, again, of users who did not complete all their time cards. And now we already talked about the fact that I'm writing this to a table in SQL. We looked at the stored procedure. Come on, Flow, do me a favor. Execute stored procedure. And I'm going to name this get user list. And we need to change that connection again because you know it went to the wrong one. And the stored procedure is get notified users. We'll take a quick look at that. So you remember, we're writing here to the time card notifications when we send a notification. And so get notified users, it's basically doing this same process. It's going to create a list of users who were notified, right? So if we look at this, it's the same kind of stuff thing. We're just selecting all of these guys from time card notifications, and we are creating a comma-separated list. Okay, so back we go, and user list is our output. We don't have any input. We're going to do, you know, we're going to do a compose step again, and then we'll get the JSON schema from that instead of like cheating and going and looking at my other workflow, right? Oops, let's spell JSON wrong. Nobody's ever done that in the history of ever, I'm sure. Okay, oops, and I was going to use compose. That's right, I lied. Let's find that compose step because we want to see what our schema is. And so compose, and my input is from get user list, the output parameters. Okay, so get user list, output parameters. And I think, let's go look at my SQL again. Yes, once again, I'm returning 1 if anything exists. So we already know we'll get back a 1 to kind of indicate, yeah, you should send an email, because we don't want to send anybody an empty email. That would be so rude. Nobody would like that. And this is the management team. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and update my flow. I'm going to run it again. You guys are used to me like with InfoPath previewing every 16 seconds, right? I do a very similar thing with Flow. I add a few steps, I run, I look at everything. And the reason I do that is because I just really like to build things incrementally. I really like to make sure, okay, step A works, B works, C works. You know, I think working incrementally saves a person an awful lot of struggle and pain. Okay, so here we've got this. We've gone ahead and notified our resources of missing time cards. We've got get user list, and we've got compose. This shows us the list of people who we notified. Right? These are the 6 bad guys out of our 8 resources, and it gives us our schema too. So we're going to copy that, and we're going to go ahead and just edit our flow. We'll go check our user mailboxes here as soon as we're done with this last step, last 2 steps. So our new step, again, we're going to use a condition. Oh, look, it was right there. Okay, and this condition, we're going to rename it email HR if anything missing. So if our return code from get user list right there is equal to, I really like the way that always like blocks you, right? Is equal to 1. Okay, then we're going to do something. And the other thing we're going to do here is we're going to delete this. Okay, and we're going to change that to a parse JSON because we've got that schema now, right? We copied that out. And come on. Flow is being a little persnickety on me all of a sudden. There we go. So here's our parse JSON. Our content is our output parameter from our get user list. Okay. Our schema, don't know, no clue. Thanks for helping. We're going to say done. Okay. So you can see it's returning a string that's a user list. So now we've got that. We're going to rename it. Parse user list, so I know what it's doing. Because look, I mean, honestly, output parameters, that's not helpful to you. And when you click on that, it doesn't show you which stored procedures output parameters that is. So do yourself a favor and put as much information as you need in these little titles to know what's going on. So finally, we're going to send an email here. Mail. And I'm using the built-in little mail thing because my Office 365 mailbox is not configured, so that's on me. Send email, and I don't know why it's not configured. I've tried. It does not like me. And we're going to rename this email HR, just because any step that has a 2 in it is kind of annoying. And find me some time cards we're missing. Okay, so now I kind of know, who needs to be talked to about this ongoing issue, right? Okay, so this is, in effect, the same workflow that I built for our client. It's worked well for them. We're going to go ahead and hit done here. We're going to run this one more time. While it's running, we're going to go take a look at our mailboxes from our different resources. So run flow. If you are not familiar with Mailinator, it's a little freebie anyone can use. Don't send anything sensitive to this. Don't send anything personal to this. But if you need like a made-up inbox for something that is not your inbox for doing something, like sending, a missing time card list or something like that, Mailinator is a pretty easy way to go. And you can just put in any of these, like my other email addresses. I did Tweety. Okay, and you can see here's our missing time cards emails that we've sent to Tweety. I did a Yosemite Sam. Right. So if you need made up email addresses for something, this is a great place to do it. They just clear these out. Anybody can use any one of these. So sometimes you go to one and it's got somebody else's test emails in there, which is fine too. You can see a lot of people have been emailing Bugs Bunny, but we haven't. So that's good news. We're going to get out of Bugs' mailbox because his mailbox is a little gross. But here we go with Michigan J Frog, his missing time cards. And then I should have gotten an email on that final HR email, and you can see I did time cards missing this week from, and here's the resources that did not complete their time cards last week. And if we go and we look at our daily time card list, we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Bugs had, whoops, that was the week, that was the previous demo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Bugs had 5. Marvin had 1, 2, 3, 4. Marvin had 5, but then the rest of our folks did not have 5, and those were the 6 that got emailed on. So if we go back to our flow now, we can see it's completely run. We can walk through our different steps, take a look at what happened in each one. If we want to go look at the email that was sent, we can take a look at the email that was sent. We can go to Yosemite Sam, we can see what email was sent there. We can see the ones where there are not emails sent as well. Let's go find, let's find Bugs. There's Bugs. We know he did all of his. So if we go to Bugs, like we can see no output, parse missing date, return code, action branching condition not satisfied, so no email was sent. It was skipped because our return code didn't match on that check. So that's the way you can kind of leaf through there and see what happened, what didn't happen. And here's our get user list. Here's the action that happened there. Parse user list, what came in, what came out, which is kind of funny because it looks the same, but in the email it's all cleaned up and you can see time cards missing this week from, etc., etc. So there you have it. That was our complete build a time card reminder demo flow. I mentioned that I tried, oh yes, I want to show you this. So let me pop over. We've got a couple more minutes and then we're going to take like a 5-minute break, and if you guys want to hang out, we'll do an open door question thing. I think Jen Lindsay was going to join me, but I'm not sure. I haven't seen her yet, but that's okay because you guys can just tolerate me for another hour if you want to hang out and if you have any questions. So if we go back into my flows here. I'm going to just drag this other window over. This is, I was messing around yesterday and the day before. I wanted to see if there was a way to do kind of a similar thing with just SharePoint, and I have to tell you, I did not find a way to do this with just SharePoint. I think if you wanted to do this without DBXL, you could. I think what you would want to do is every time a time card was submitted, I think you would want to have a Microsoft flow running on this library that every time a time card was submitted, went and wrote a line to the database, because I just don't think you're going to be able to do kind of the complicated date crunching and returning of aggregated data that I'm doing in this with just built-in SharePoint steps. I think you're going to have to write data to an Azure database and do the more complicated handling there. A couple things I learned goofing around with this were, first off, using an OData filter on a form library did not work. I never got any results back, even when I hard-coded strings in, even when I had valid query filters that worked for me in the browser. Okay, so that's just a quick FYI. The other thing I learned that was really interesting is, look at this. You can use the workflow logic syntax in compose variables. So like right here, I'm getting today minus 7 days, and that's what this variable will return when you run this. So that was kind of an interesting thing that I hadn't realized you could do until I started trying to do this in there. So keep in mind that you can use that workflow logic syntax in a compose variable. So usually we would go to questions. Since we're going to have this little open door follow-up afterwards, I would say, you know, unless you've got something pressing and you cannot wait for that, maybe hold off and we'll do questions, take a little break and do questions after that. Does that sound good to everyone? I guess I haven't unmuted people yet, but maybe like raise your hand, or at any rate, why don't we take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll do this open door discussion session. And we can just go through any questions you might have about the demo or any questions you might have about Flow in general. If you're not going to stay for that, that's absolutely cool. But what we'll do is, after this entire webinar is over, we'll send out the survey. So let's take a really short break and I'll be right back. Thank you so much for attending if you can't stay for the open door. And do email me. Let me know if you have any particular topics on Flow that you would like to learn more about. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay, everybody, so let's try this open door thing. So what I want to do is I want to unmute everybody. So I want to give you a heads up before I do that, just because I think it's mean otherwise. So let's see what happens when I unmute everyone. And hopefully if you have a headset or something like that with a mic, you can go ahead and manually mute yourself. Okay, so Corey had a question about whether Flow can be used to email documents to SharePoint. Corey, do you want to elaborate on that at all?
Man, boy, I wish you had let me know that.
We used to use the actual email address in SharePoint so that people could email directly to a library, but now that's not allowed. We switched to Microsoft SharePoint Online. So we're looking for a way to kind of replicate that behavior,
Okay.
so that we can't do it directly.
Okay, so you're looking for a way to, from email, add a document to a library, right?
Correct.
Let's look and see. What do we have? In all flows, anything here that's useful? Collect data might be useful. Save Office 365 email attachments to OneDrive for business. I gotta move this little panel. Send an approval email. Get push notification. All right. So this is this is why I said what I do is I hit create from blank. Let's create. So I'm just trying to I'm trying to think of what the steps could possibly be if we haven't. Let's go back to that one. Let's go back to that one that did the save Office 365 email attachments. Are you guys using Office 365 email? Office 365 Outlook?
Yes.
Okay. I've got an account issue there, but let's see. View permissions, close, switch account, add new connection. I think because my Office 365 Outlook isn't set up, I'm not going to be able to do something from Office 365. I'm just curious if there's a way, if we do Outlook 365 to OneDrive for Business, will be saved in a folder called email attachments. That doesn't look like it's quite what we're looking for. I do not know. I'm not seeing a way offhand to do that same thing, but I'm wondering if it might not be possible with Office 365 Outlook to do that. Jen Lindsay, I know her Office 365 Outlook is configured. So maybe what I'll do, I've got your email from the webinar sign up. So what I'll do is I'll look into this and I'll send you an email and let you know what we learn as to what steps it would take to be able to replicate that. It's just I have a technical, as you can see, I have a technical issue with Office 365 Outlook. And so I'm going to bug Jen on that.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll see if there's a way to do something, because I mean if they let you do and you were talking about attachments, they let you do attachments to OneDrive, so I would think you might be able to do the same thing to a SharePoint library, but it's just a matter of getting a flow open so we can actually look at the steps.
Okay.
Good question, and I will make a note of that, and I will get back to you. If it's not later today, it will be sometime tomorrow. Okay? Anybody?
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Anybody else have something they'd like to look at that maybe I can answer since that was a no-go? Anybody?
Oh man.
Come on, you guys. There's got to be something fun here that you want to try.
I could ask another question.
Please do. Since I've got you. Yes, please do. Ask another question. Don't make it about Office 365 Outlook.
Okay, this is about SharePoint. If we wanted to send an email when a task was not completed, is that possible through Flow?
Maybe. When a task is not completed. So when a task is not completed by its due date?
Yes.
Okay, create tasks for important Outlook emails. Create task, create task, create task. We want to send an email on late tasks. I'm wondering if this would be something that would be best handled again with a recurrence flow, right? Because when we think about something like that, let's go find a tasks list. When we think about something like late tasks, it's a matter of checking to see if something is marked completed. So I would think that we have no idea what's going on with my task list here, but who knows, because I do all kinds of crazy things in my test site. So we're going to do test, we're going to do assigned to, here I am, status, not started, due, on calendar, be my friend, due the 14th. Okay, so that one's late right now. Yes, I'm looking at my calendar. You guys can't see me, but I'm like, eh. And let's assign this to me too. I think you can. I think we can. I think I would use a recurrence task. I think I'd run it like every night. Oh, and you guys might be wondering why I'm setting up one that's late and one that's not late. That would be because anytime I'm dealing with data where there's going to be, multiple items, I like to always make sure there's more than one item. It's sort of like if you're working at InfoPath and you've got repeating data and you only ever test your logic with a single row, you're going to be sadly surprised when you put the thing in production and people actually have multiple rows. So always make sure you have more than one thing, no matter where you are. So here's my task list. We've got that set up. Let's do a quickie little flow. Oops, Control Z. Boy, it's nice that I am so incredibly, okay, escape. I was trying to get my URL in advance, but apparently I've forgotten how to copy and paste. All right, so let's do a new flow. My flows. Come on, go baby. Create from blank. Okay, we're going to do recurrence again. Hey, you guys, I'm not going to, this is going to be a do as I say and not as I do. I'm not going to rename everything this time. I would probably run it every night, right? I'd probably do, once a day, run it every night. That way when people wake up in the morning, they've got the email reminding them that their task was late. We need to get items. See how well that does for me this time. Oh, get items was better than clicking SharePoint first. Okay, and so here's my site. I love the way it clears that for me when I click out too quickly. And my list is tasks. Hey, where's my task list? Boogers. So it is actually called tasks. So let's go back over here and click on enter custom value. Tasks. We'll find out soon enough if it's going to do anything for me. More, I can add and apply to each. My output is value from my task list. Now, if it hadn't found my task list, if I put the name in wrong or something like that, I wouldn't have had anything here in my dynamic content. Okay, so if you don't see what you expect, assume there is something wrong. Okay, and go from there. Double check your URL, double check your list name. So for each task, what are we going to do? We're going to find out if it's late. So how do we know if it's late? We're definitely going to need a condition. If, let's see, status. I need to scroll here. If percent complete, we're going to have to do a complicated condition. That'll be fun. If percent complete is equal to 0, and we don't have an additional condition here, so we would have to add either another condition. We're going to try that, or we can make it complicated. There we go. We can just add another condition. I think that's simpler than saying let's and due date. Due date is see, this is the part that I really like, is when that blocks me. Is equal to we want less than. We're going to have to go find that syntax. That's maybe that'll let it go away. Is equal to, right? And we don't have an option of today. So we're going to go find the right syntax. Workflow logic apps syntax. Workflow definition language schema is what we're looking for here, and we're going to go now. There it is, UTC now. Okay, so UTC now, it returns the current timestamp as a string. like this. And so this is what we need over here in our flow is equal to, and we know we don't want equal to. We're going to change that in a second. UTC now. If you wanted this in a specific format, you could put a format in there, like year dash month dash day. We don't need a specific format. And so what are we looking for? Greater than, less than? We're looking for less than. It's probably LT, but less than. Oh, everything's so jumpy. Less or equals, less. Okay, so here's our syntax. Values can be integer, float, or string. That's not helpful. Greater, equal, not if. What about date? How do we compare dates? If they're strings. Okay, let's think for a second. UTC is returning our date in a format that looks like, let's open up Notepad++ so we don't feel like crying. UTC is returning our date in a format that looks like this, 0615T 08 09 00 Z. So this is the format it's returning it in. So it does return it as a string, so we should be able to use less because our other date, I think, is going to come back like this. Probably T, right, 000000 Z. And so if we compared two strings and they were these format, this string would be less than that string, right? Tell me if I'm wrong, you guys. But I think less is going to do what we need because I think we are working with strings. So let's go with less here. Edit in advanced mode. Instead of equals, we're going to go less. Isn't this fun, guys? Less, right? And we are going to rename these just so that I don't go crazy. We're going to call that date check. We'll find out if we've got it right or wrong. And we're going to call this complete check. Rename complete check. Okay, now we could have also, in advanced mode, we could have put our and condition there instead of adding multiple conditions this way. It's up to you. Add an action. So if we meet this condition where it's not complete, percent complete is equal to 0, and if we meet this condition, boy, they both do nothing. Yeah, we might have a problem there. Okay. Oh, I know what I'm doing wrong. Yeah. Sorry, guys. This is fun, right? Let's move you in here. If yes, we're going to check the date. Okay. So now we're cooking. Okay. So if it's not complete, then we're going to check the date. Let me make sure my screen is sharing correctly. Okay, great. If it's not complete, then we're going to check the date. And then finally, we're going to send an email. So let's get over here and, oh, come on. I got to move this little guy. Cancel. I don't want that action there. We're going to add an action here. Okay, so we check complete, we check the date, and now we add an action of sending an email. And we're going to find out if this works. And if it works, we're going to be super happy. And if it doesn't work, at least we learned something. Mail, send email. We're going to send it to the person who has the task assigned to email. Remember, you guys, I mentioned earlier, if you use a people picker, you get the different stuff. So when I assigned it to myself, I've got the display name, the department, the job title, my picture. Won't that be useful? Your task is late. Please complete. See how polite I am even in test emails. Please complete, because sometimes you accidentally send test emails to people. Never use profanity in test emails. ASAP. Okay, here we go. I think we're done, right? This is basically it, right? We check our items every night. We see if we've got anything that's 0% complete that is late, where the due date is less than now. We have no idea if this date check's going to work, so we've got a lot of mystery and drama, and we're going to name this check for late tasks. And we're going to hit, okay, everybody's got their fingers crossed. We're going to hit create flow and see if we get any errors creating it. Okay, no errors creating it. And so now it says it ran 2 seconds ago. Do you trust that? I don't know that I trust that. Okay, so it says apply to each. So, okay, so here's mystery. I don't know. I mean, sometimes I find that they run when I save them, and sometimes they don't. Okay, so you can see right now complete check is returning false. And so we all know that that is not the case because we don't have either of those tasks complete. So let's edit the flow and change our complete check condition. If percent complete is not equal to 100, I'm sort of up in the air as to what's actually stored in percent complete. So perhaps we'll look at the status instead. Status is not equal to completed. Let's do that. Let's try that. Status. You guys didn't know we were going to have so much fun today, did you? Status value. And then we have to click somewhere else to make that fool thing get out of my way, is not equal to completed. Let's try that. The nice thing is, at least for me, I feel like these run pretty quickly. So the nice thing is when you make a change and then you run, make a change and then you run. One thing I do note is that sometimes it takes a minute for your change to save. So sometimes when you do really quick like that, make a change and then run, you end up in a scenario where your change isn't saved yet. But at this point we have, just 1 second, let me get a link to Jen Lindsay of this webinar, and I think, because I just saw her pop up in chat. Oh, I don't know. Here we go. All right. I've just added her, I think. Okay, so here we are. We can see that for our first record, we got back a true, and our second record, we got back a true. Well, we expected that for both of those, right? So that's good. So now let's check our date check. And for our second record, we got back a true, which we shouldn't have. And our first record, we got back a true, which we shouldn't have, which we should have. So we've got a problem with our date. No. Oh, excellent. I only got one email. My task is late. Please complete test ASAP. So I only got one email. So that definitely worked on my late task. What concerns me is I don't think date check should have returned true on the second one, but it shows that it did. Oh, there we go. Yay. Okay. So it says, it said it returns true, but at the same point in time, it shows that the action, the execution, the branching condition was not satisfied. So it looks like that syntax did work. So if we click to previous, and I did only get one email, so if we click to previous and look at it, you can see the send email showed that it was late. So the answer then to your question, can we use Flow to send emails on late tasks, would be yes. And it just looks like what we just did. And if we go to edit Flow real quick, let me paste into chat what I used in this date check formula. You guys, there's going to be a recording too, but sometimes these formulas, the syntax can be a little tricky if you're not used to it. I'm not used to it yet. I haven't used it very long. And so, you know, it's nice to have examples. Okay, and so as you might recall, first I went in basic mode, I picked the due date, and then I just kind of picked something random like equals, and then I changed it to less afterwards, and it works because the fact that these dates are returned as strings, that is not the notepad I wanted, because they're returned as strings, and so the less comparison is going to work correctly because of that. Does that make sense?
Yes, that was awesome.
So do you think this is something you could build in Flow?
Absolutely.
Yay! Okay, hooray! Well, we've solved one problem. I think Jen is joining us. I hope so. And if she does, then I will have her take a look at the, I'm just going to ask if she can. Sorry about the typing noise. I'm going to have her take a look at the question about emailing things. Does anybody else have a scenario they'd like to look at?
I had one comment. This is Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Earlier you had mentioned that the OData filtering didn't work on a form library.
That's right.
I have used it, and I think it works with a list. So I think
it does.
Yeah. I just wanted to point that out.
Oh, I'm glad you did. Yeah, it does work with a list. I do not know if it works with a document library. I didn't test with that. I do know in my testing with a form library, it completely failed. Now, it works in the browser. If you use a proper syntax on your filter, it works in the browser, but it failed in Flow, and I don't know why. I was curious if it had to do with my actual library name having spaces in it, which seems kind of goofy, but it's definitely always worth trying again, because just because something doesn't work today doesn't mean it's not going to work tomorrow, which is part of the fun of it. I'm trying to see if Jen's going to join. Okay. Let me see if I can find a way to get her to join. Because I'd like her to try the I'd like her to try the scenario with Office 365, since we know her Office 365 works. Anybody have, oh, go ahead. Was there something else?
Sorry, coughing.
Oh, that's fine. Susan asked if flows can be copied. Wouldn't that be nice? I think what you could do, we're going to go ahead and say leave this page. I think what you can do is you can save your flow as a template. Okay, so if we submit it as a template, which we're not going to do, but I think that also makes it publicly available. Okay, and so I would think you could submit it as a template and then use it in that way, but I have not done that. So I don't know what the potential gotchas are. Let's ask Flo. So let's find out if we can find a little something about publishing a template. There we go. The documentation is still pretty rough, you know, but they suggest, yeah, will verify and possibly modify. If the team approves your template, it will appear in the gallery of templates for Microsoft Flow. Okay, so it will become public when you submit it as a template, when you publish it as a template. So, you know, whether or not that's something you would want to do, I don't know. I'm sure they modify it to remove things like your exact list and so on. It just leaves the steps in place. So you could do that. You would probably have a little bit of a wait. There really isn't anything for copying. What I have done in the past is I just open it up in one browser window and open the other in another browser window and basically kind of step through the logic and recreate it. As you can see, most of the steps are pretty quick to add. So that's you know, one way to do it. It's not beautiful.
What does the save as do?
Well, aren't you a blessing? Save as, make a copy of it. Okay, question answered. Got it for the win. That's great. I didn't even notice that. That's fantastic. So there we go. Make a copy of it and you're done. Beautiful. No need to create a template and save it. Most of us probably don't really want to create templates of our stuff and make them publicly available unless you've got something really super cool. Well, that was a great thing. Anything else, you guys? Any questions that Corey can answer for you? thing, and I'm still waiting to see if Jen can join. I'm not seeing her having any success, so we might have to look into that question on Outlook attachments separately. And we'll give her one more minute just in case. Anything else anybody want to look at or have questions about?
Can anybody use Flow?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if there are restrictions on who has access to it, but I think, back we go, I didn't want to do that. I think when you go to your site, as long as it's available to you here, I haven't run across anybody on my team yet who's been like, oh, that's not accessible to me on Office 365. So there may be a setting somewhere to prevent your users from having access to it, but I'm not sure. You guys want to check on your Office 365 and make sure everybody's got that option there?
I do have the option. I guess I must have seen it at one point where it said you had to have your admin install it or something.
Yeah.
It didn't for SharePoint.
Yeah, and that may
there.
be, yeah, it may be when they initially released it. I know they had some limitations on who it was available to because it was pretty rough. It was in beta and it was pretty rough. And so it could be now that it's more widely available. So, and then when you do create them, I mean, one thing I talked about last time is, be sure if you want more than one person to be able to use it, that you add other people in your team, as the owners. And then that way you can make sure that you're not the only person who can make changes to it. So you may want to add other people as owners to your various flows to make sure that you're not the sole keeper of the flow. I guess, unless we see Jen, it looks like she is not, it looks like she is going to make it. Sorry, guys, you can just hold tight one more minute, then we maybe be able to look at this other scenario that you mentioned, Corey, which is actually, I think, really cool. I'm just trying to get her online with us here. And have her share out and show us something. I was trying to think if there was anything else that was of interest. I know we talked about button flows. So just in case anybody here wasn't at the Flow webinar at the end of May, there's a pretty cool app out. I've used the iPhone one. I think there's supposed to be one for Windows Phone. I'm pretty sure there's one for Android phones for MS Flow where you can start flows from your phone. You can create button flows in the phone app so that you can, have a flow on your phone that you can start from a button. So some of those things are also really worth looking at. I think that is probably, unless anybody has any other questions, I think that's about it of interest. Let me bug Jen one more time. Okay, and so we'll see if she's managing to get signed in. The problem she had was joining the webinar outside of the time for the webinar. And so when I just sent her the link, she ended up with a link saying that she couldn't join. Okay, guys. I guess, okay, and we answered Susan. Susan, I'm going to go ahead and type an answer to your question here just so it's resolved in this little question thing. Yes, we can use save as, and that way we've got an answer to that in the documentation from the meeting. Our other options here were just run now, submit as template. Okay, so there was nothing more interest there. See all connections. That just shows the connections in the flow. Can't edit these. You can remove them, but you can't edit them. And okay, Jen has gotten signed in finally, and she said she's going to be here soon. So she's joining the webinar, which means she's doing that thing where she waits for for the webinar to start up. So hopefully she will be with us shortly and can then use this last little bit of time to take a look at the whole Outlook 365 question. Oh gosh, I see her. This is wonderful. I'm so glad. Looks like she's still just getting into the meeting. Hey Jen, you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good morning. So we have a few people left. We had a really interesting question. I'm going to make you a presenter here in just a second. We had an interesting question that I couldn't help with because my Office 365 email is not configured. I've never been able to get it configured. So what's going on is Corey had an email-enabled library, so people could email things to a SharePoint library, and was wondering if Microsoft Flow could do the same thing. And I saw this template, Save Office 365 Email Attachments to OneDrive for Business, and I was wondering if this template could be modified to save to library instead of save to OneDrive. But since I can't connect to Office 365 Email, I can't even set up a make-believe flow. So can I make you presenter and you could try this?
Yeah, let me make sure that I do have my Office 365 email configured internally. I know I've done it on customer sites before, but I don't think I've done it on.
It didn't even occur to me to sign into a customer site and use their flow. I should have thought of that. That's our other alternative then.
Right. So let me.
I mean, if I don't
want to
save it, does it really matter?
Yeah, I know. Let me see if I do have my let me just log into a customer site and see what happens. Because okay, yeah, no, I don't have mine.
Okay, but you've actually, in a way, you've solved the problem, right? Because you just you made a suggestion, which is okay, everybody. Let's actually. I'm gonna go over here and get this set up.
Gotcha.
I'm going to sign into a customer's site and start flow there, and then I'm going to pop back over because we want to keep people's stuff kind of private, but I can start a new flow and we don't have to save it, folks. So that's what we're going to do is we're going to dummy something up here without actually saving it because we know we've got email configured for Outlook 365 for this account. So let me just, I'll move this. I know this is boring right now, guys, because you're looking at the other screen, but I'm just going to get things sort of set up and then I'm going to drag this over. Email, and here it is. So here's the action. Okay, and let me pop this over here. And so I'm going to say create flow. You guys, we're not going to actually run this, okay, because it's customer site and that would be wrong. Oh, come on. All right, so it's creating a new flow, and we're going to say edit on new email, apply to each attachment. Look at this big long thing of nothingness. Okay. Apply to each attachment, create file. Okay, so let's just see. Oh, that's not annoying at all. Okay, hang on. Let me make this small again so it quits doing this. Okay, so sorry about the distraction of like the multiple browser windows. So the first step here is the initiating action is on new email. So this is a new email. This is an email coming into your Office 365 account though, right? Yeah, that's coming in. So that's different. That's not the same thing because what Corey's talking about is sending an email out, right, Corey?
Yes, but it could work if they emailed themselves.
Right. You'd have to have a subject filter, right? So let's just, okay, so it could work if they emailed themselves. Boy, that seems tricky to teach users how to do that. Wouldn't it be easier just to teach them to upload stuff to SharePoint?
Yeah. Well, they do, but that's a whole other issue.
Hillary, what if they emailed a fixed alias, like if you just created a new mailbox and they emailed that alias, and then
Right,
you set flow up underneath that
right,
account?
right. Corey, so that, I think Jen's idea there might be the right idea, that you would set up a new email alias in Office 365. So, I mean, that would mean
Right.
setting up an additional user who would be your inbox for these attachments. So let's just see if the to SharePoint is possible. Can we, instead of create file here, can we add an action of creating a file in SharePoint? And I think that's the, yeah, create SharePoint file. What are our options here? Site address, folder path, file content. What do we got here? File content is the content from that. So my guess then is going to be yes. Oh, this outputs an array. A for each cannot be nested inside of another for each. Oh, come on. On new email, create file. You let it do it in OneDrive. I just want to take a look at this. Attachment. Where's the content? There it is. Oh, it's not going to let me it's not going to let me modify this. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't the default value for that content? I'm actually doing this on my end.
Yeah,
too.
it was. The default value for there was content when I created it from the template, but it's not going to let me modify it.
Oh, yeah, because this is probably
It's something
another Microsoft Flow
special.
bug.
Well, it's something special, right? Right, because they're saying the output of attachments is an array, which, okay, I get that. It probably is. Apply to each attachment on the email, select an output, which is attachments. Insert parameters from previous step. Select an output, create file. Sorry, you guys, I like talk myself through it. Insert parameters, but you can see it's only got, it doesn't have, yeah, interesting. Okay, so it doesn't look like it's going to let us modify this guy. Are you having any luck, Jen?
Well, my default value is just content. I haven't, for the file content field, my default value is content.
Right.
I didn't actually
but
select
if you try to remove it and then put it in again.
Oh, okay.
Or if you try to create a SharePoint file from it.
I see.
What if you deleted one of the create file, like the second create file? Maybe if you got rid of that step, it would let you modify the first one.
Let's try it. Yes, that's fine. Okay, so now can we modify the first step? No. Heart full of hate. Nothing but hate. And we're going to delete this guy because we don't care about this guy. We're going to blow this whole flow anyway. So we've got an output from the previous step, which is attachments, and we're saying apply to each attachment. And we're going to, I just want to try it one more time and see if it'll let me create a file in SharePoint. Create a file, file content, parameters from previous steps on new email. So it's not giving me the option, I see. It's not letting me select the content from the apply to each. The apply to each is on attachments, and we're saying for each attachment do this, but the parameters it's letting me select from are all from on new email, not from the apply to each, which is kind of interesting. Not in a good way, interesting in a bad way. So in theory, it seems like, well, I think then we'd want to see attachment SharePoint. We're going to try just that. Oh, okay, so the answer is yes. Of course you can do this. search for the right thing. So it looks like, okay, so it looks like the answer here is kind of a tentative yes because of the whole inbox setup. So you might want to, you could probably use this template, save my email attachments to a SharePoint document library. Let me go fix the bad I have done here already. And first off, I want to delete that flow. Yeah, I want to delete it. I don't really want this running, although it was just on mine. And so we're going to go, I'm going to make this window bigger and see if it'll let me search. Search templates. Okay, so it's email, SharePoint is what we want to search for. Now we know. Save my email attachments to a SharePoint document library. Okay, and so what I think you'd want to do is maybe create an inbox, create a user whose inbox was just used for getting attachments to a library, and then your users could just email to that inbox, right? And that's the account you would use here for your Office 365 Outlook, and then it could write to a SharePoint library. And I think that would give your users the exact same experience they have had, which is what the concern is, right?
Correct.
And so you would go ahead and just pick your folder, and it would be, you know, probably inbox, but the connection here would be that particular user. And then you would just have to fill in your site address and your folder path here. And then you don't want to change these because if you do, it will never let you put them back again. But I think this template would do it for you. I think as long as you had an email inbox that was Office 365 that your users could all send to, and then when you create the flow, you use that inbox. Does that sound?
Now, I'm wondering if I don't know if I can actually get another email address because it's governed by the larger university for their act, and I think it's tied to Active Directory. I know I've asked for like a test account before for SharePoint and couldn't get one. So I'm not sure if they'll do it, but I'm going to ask.
I would ask.
Because I think that would really work.
I would ask and say, hey, we need a specific email that can be used just for these things that they want to save to this particular library, and then you could create a file from there. And I think this save email attachments to a SharePoint document library would be the right approach to take. I think that would be the right template, and it looks like it would work.
Definitely. I'm going to give that one a try.
Okay, and Jen, thank you for the suggestion that I go ahead and just use the customer's account, because I never thought about that. I was all just like, well, my email doesn't work, so it didn't occur to me to use the customer's account. So yeah,
no problem.
Yeah, very nice. Nicely done. Okay, anything else, you guys, since we're still hanging out here? And we have been, we've been dropping people, which is fine. Jen, one thing, I don't know if you noticed that Corey pointed out, Susan had a question about copying flows, and I was like, I don't think so unless you save it as a template, but you can. There's a save as.
Oh, there is. I haven't actually tried saving.
Yeah, so you can do a save as if you ever want to make a copy. And the other thing that's cool, that's new, and I think this has just been really recent, is this whole dashboard thing when you click on a flow now, where it shows the run history, the connections, the owners, and all of that stuff. And that's very new, because I just ran into that this last week when I was setting up my initial slides for the webinar. So
yeah, I ran into it the past week or two as well. So.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you were able to join, Jen, even though it was just for a few minutes. You guys, if you have anything else, just holler at us. You know email addresses for us. I'm so glad people were able to come. If you have any ideas for additional flow webinars, please send them our way. We're very interested in learning more about this ourselves, and if you come up with something cool, I would love to have a chance to try to build it so that I get a chance to learn something new. And so, yeah, if you've got suggestions for flow webinars, we would love to hear them. Okay?
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks very much.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you could attend, and I hope this was helpful. And yeah, we'll talk to everybody again soon. We'll send out a little survey and stuff after this too. If you fill it out, I've got a few little things from the webinar earlier that I'll send along. Have a fantastic day. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.